education sphere with some magnets. Like every single character's arc has to perfectly align over 100 episodes. You can't have any plot holes. And furthermore, the entire narrative has to comply with strict, constantly changing network regulations.
Right. Except in this scenario, the network is a medical accreditation.
Exactly. The show Bible is housed in some labyrinthine learning management system. And the characters are future doctors holding actual human lives in their hands.
Yeah, that analogy really captures the sustained, grueling focus required for the task. Because curriculum mapping is it's the systematic alignment of educational content.
Yeah.
You start with overarching standards, the absolute non-negotiable requirements of what a physician must know. Then you have to disaggregate those massive standards into highly specific, granular learning objectives.
Bringing it all the way down.
Exactly. And then you map those objectives to exact pedagogical strategies. And finally, you align all of that with specific evaluation methods.
It sounds exhausting.
It is intensely detail heavy. You're building codified, structured matrices so that anyone can transparently visualize how a single multiple choice question relates to a global accreditation standard.
But the introduction of AI into this rigid, heavily regulated environment hasn't exactly been smooth.
Oh, definitely. The source text uses a brilliant phrase to describe the current atmosphere. They state that medical education is experiencing an AI culture shock.
Culture shock. Yeah, that makes total sense.
No, it perfectly encapsulates the whiplash educators. On one side, there is profound awe. I mean, they're staring at a technological tool capable of executing in 30 seconds what would traditionally take a committee of highly paid professionals 3 weeks to accomplish.
Wow, yeah.
But on the other side, there's deep existential apprehension. These are professionals whose entire careers are built on precision and evidence.
Right, and handing over the architectural keys of a medical program to an algorithm that, occasionally hallucinates facts, that's terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying. So our mission here today is to navigate that exact tension. We want to move you from a place of systemic resistance or generalized fear into a posture of practical, highly responsive adaptation.
I love that. Practical adaptation. Yeah, so to structure this enormous undertaking to build this medical show Bible without losing the plot, the authors ground their entire study in a foundational framework known as Kern's 6-step model for curriculum development. And to build any kind of lasting structure, you first need to survey the land. You have to know what the environment demands and what you currently have.
Yeah, which brings us to the first 2 steps of Kern's model and the targeted needs assessment.
Okay, let's dive into the blueprint phase because this is where the friction usually begins, right?
Oh, yeah, because accrediting agencies exist internationally and they're not static entities. They frequently revise their massive guideline documents.
And historically, when a new version drops, what happens?
Human educators have to engage in an agonizing process. They literally sit down, place the old monolithic document side by side with the new monolithic document, and manually scan for every single substantive change, addition, removal, or even slight modification of terminology.
Oh my gosh. Just staring at hundreds of pages of bureaucratic text, trying to play the world's highest stakes game and spot the difference.
Exactly.
It's not like a recipe for immediate burnout.
It is. The cognitive load of that task virtually guarantees human error. But the University of Washington team deployed an LLM to perform this exact standards alignment analysis.
They didn't just use any open source web interface.
No, they specifically highlight the necessity of using an AI with commercial data protections. When you are feeding proprietary institutional curriculum data into a system, you absolutely cannot risk that data being absorbed.
Right, that security layer is the prerequisite.
Yeah.
But what really fascinated me was the mechanics of how they actually instructed the AI. Prompt strategy is where the true value lies.
Yeah, the prompting is everything.
They didn't just drag and drop the files and casually type, hey, what changed? They engineered a highly constrained prompt. I'll quote the authors directly here. They instructed the AI to strictly use the uploaded documents without conducting an online search to summarize the changes.
And that constraint fundamentally alters how the model processes the request.
How so?
Well, by explicitly forbidding an internet search, they artificially shrank the AI's universe of knowledge to just those 2 uploaded files. Large language models are built to be helpful, right? And if they find a gap in information, they will often pull from their vast parameter weights to fill that gap.
Which is how you get hallucinations.
Exactly. By placing a wall around the uploaded text, the authors forced the model to act purely as a comparative analytical engine rather than an open-ended generative one.
And the result they achieved that specific constraint were staggering. The AI successfully flagged the novel requirements and pinpointed the critical differences between the old and new accreditation standards.
And it saved them so much time.
It saved the curriculum team 2 full working days of manual grueling labor, 2 entire days handed back to the faculty,
Which is incredible.
And perhaps more importantly, the AI caught manual errors and omissions that the human reviewers had actually overlooked in previous cycles.
Because the machine possesses an untiring capacity for syntactic comparison. It doesn't simply be reading page 400. However, the authors are vigilant in noting that human oversight remains a fixed requirement.
Right, you can just blindly trust the output.
Exactly. The human experts still manually review the generated output to ensure contextual accuracy. Paradigm shift isn't about replacing the human leader. It's about shifting the human's role from finding the needles in the haystack to simply verifying that the needles the AI found are, in fact, the correct ones.
That makes total sense. Which leads us into a scenario that feels a bit like the movie Inception.
Oh, the AI Inception part.
Yes, we're talking about a needs assessment, and the institution realized they had a massive emerging gap. They needed to teach medical students about artificial intelligence. So they used an AI model to figure out how to teach humans about AI.
The meta layer here is just striking, but the administrative problem was very real. Medical curricula are mandated to undergo continuous quality improvement to incorporate emerging scientific knowledge. So the institution was tasked with implementing a novel undergraduate medical education curriculum focused on AI in healthcare. They had to embed a brand new competency that they termed critical AI appraisal into existing, already overcrowded curriculum maps.
And they didn't just ask the AI to write a syllabus, did they?
No, they prompted it to propose integration strategies using Kern's 6-step framework. And the output was a massive, highly structured architectural plan.
What kind of gaps did it?
Well, the AI identified foundational knowledge gaps that students would need filled before they could even understand AI. Things like core statistical concepts, data literacy, and the methodologies used to validate algorithms.
What really demonstrates the power of natural language processing here is that AI is operating in a vacuum. It didn't just suggest a brand new, isolated 4-week course on AI, which would just completely disrupt the entire scheduling matrix.
Right, because that would be a logistical nightmare.
Exactly. Instead, it mapped these new concepts to existing educational elements. It suggested weaving AI validation methodologies into the pre-existing evidence-based medicine modules.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, and it suggested adding the core statistical concepts into the established biostatistics courses. It provided a year-by-year breakdown of integration, complete session objectives, and multi-level assessment methods.
It effectively cures the blank page syndrome.
Yes.
You aren't sitting in a committee meeting staring at a whiteboard for 4 hours debating where to fit a new lecture. You are looking at a 50% completed roadmap.
And the authors noted that this specific output reduced their faculty planning time by 50%. It gives the human experts a highly detailed skeleton that they can immediately begin to debate, edit, and refine.
The acceleration of the preliminary design phase is immense, but building the map is really only half the battle of the needs assessment. Often the challenge is proving what is already on the map. Medical schools frequently receive inquiries from governing bodies, or even internal audits, demanding to know where exactly a specific topic is being taught across the 4-year program.
And finding the answer to that requires curriculum keyword mapping. You are hunting for highly specific subjects across thousands of disparate documents, syllabi, and objective pieces.
And to solve this, the authors utilized a prompt engineering technique called the persona pattern.
Okay, what is the persona pattern?
It's a cornerstone of advanced prompting. You explicitly instruct the model to adopt a specific identity.
Oh, so in this case, they told the AI, act as an expert in curriculum mapping in medical education.
Yes, but they didn't stop there. They integrated the exact list of required keywords directly into the prompt, and they severely limited the model's creative parameters.
So
they explicitly told the AI that it was not allowed to invent or suggest new keywords outside of the provided list.
okay, give me an example of how that works in practice.
Sure. They provided the AI with a specific learning objective on their curriculum. For instance, an objective focused on identifying how social determinants of health can affect imaging services and ultimately lead to health disparities.
Okay.
Then they fed the AI their rigid list of approved keywords. The model successfully analyzed the objective and matched it to the keywords: social determinants of health, health disparities, and imaging.
Okay, let me push back on this process for a second.
Go for it.
If we're explicitly telling the AI to act as an expert, but then we are severely restricting its creativity, locking it into a predefined list of words, aren't we basically just using a multi-billion-dollar supercomputer as a glorified Control-F search function? Like, why introduce an LLM into a process that a standard database query could theoretically handle?
That is a great question. The distinction between a standard database query and an LLM is the difference between tactic matching and semantic understanding.
Syntactic versus semantic. Okay, break that down.
The Control-F keyword search is purely syntactic. It requires an exact string of characters to yield a result. Imagine a learning objective that discusses financial barriers to receiving an MRI. Right. If you run a standard database query for the required keyword social determinants of health, you will get 0 results. The exact words are not there. To an auditor, it looks like you are failing to teach the subject.
Just because the professor who wrote the objective used different vocabulary than the accreditation board.
Exactly the problem. But an LLM utilizes natural language processing. It doesn't just look at characters. It understands the semantic weight of content.
Wow.
The neural network understands that financial barriers is a concept inextricably linked to the broader category of social determinants of health. It knows that an MRI falls under the umbrella of imaging. It performs contextual matching.
So it's acting as a semantic bridge between the professor's natural language and bureaucracy's rigid mixonomy.
That is the precise mechanism of value. And that is why constraining its hallucinations is so vital. You want to leverage its massive contextual understanding of language, but you strictly want it to output only the approved vocabulary of your institution.
You need the brain of an expert, but the discipline of an auditor.
That's a perfect way to say it.
That distinction makes the entire endeavor make sense. It's not just finding words, it's understanding the meaning of the curriculum, which transitions us organically from finding the gaps in the map to deciding what we're actually going to do.
Right, moving on to the next phase.
Once the needs are assessed, we have to set the destination. This is current step 3, goals, objectives.
And moving from analysis to generation requires a different approach. You know the gaps, now you have to explicitly define what the learner must achieve. The AI shifts from being a reader to being a drafter.
And in medical training, drafting objectives is uniquely complicated because of the concept of progressive responsibility.
Yes, the authors demonstrated this by using the AI to design competency-based goals for an orthopedic trauma rotation. But they needed these goals separated across 3 entirely different years of residency: PGY1, PGY2, and PGY3.
And for those unfamiliar with medical acronyms, that translates to postgraduate year 1, 2, and 3.
Right. A first-year resident and intern is operating under a vastly different set of expectations than a senior third-year resident. The educational goals must reflect that escalating difference.
So how did the AI handle that progression?
When prompted to generate these layered objectives, the AI demonstrated a highly nuanced understanding of this approach. For the PGY1 residents, the AI drafted an objective heavily focused on foundational skill assessment.
Like what?
It Investigators they were tasked with reviewing supervisor feedback after each trauma case and implementing one actionable improvement plan.
It's a very grounded, receptive goal. Learn to take feedback and change what needed. What about the second years?
For the PJY2 residents, the AI recognized the need for analytical application. The objective shifted. The second-year residents were tasked to review current trauma care literature, select evidence-based findings, and actively apply them to at least 3 clinical cases.
Wow.
And explicitly documenting the improvements in each case.
So they moved from just receiving instructions to independently applying established research to real patients.
Exactly. And finally, the AI generated the objective of PJY2 residents, shifting the paradigm entirely toward leadership and systemic.
Leading the department.
Yes. The senior residents were tasked with conducting a comprehensive review of departmental trauma care practices, presenting evidence-based recommendations to the entire staff, and tracking measurable department-wide improvements by clinical rotation.
And the AI drafted this entire staggered progressive competency ladder, moving from personal feedback to clinical applications to departmental leadership in under an hour.
Under an hour. It delivered a perfectly scaled skeleton for the program directors to work on.
It removes the friction of building the architectural framing, allowing the experts to immediately start polishing the finishes. But this drafting process exposes one of the most significant vulnerabilities of using AI, right?
It does, a phenomenon the authors documented closely for conducting a gap analysis between broad standards and specific objectives.
This is the danger of what the authors call high sensitivity. They were attempting to connect broad accreditation content descriptors, phrases like hemodynamics, blood flow, pressure, to highly specific educational learning objectives within their system.
The AI successfully mapped those broad terms to a specific granular objective of explaining the fluid flow equation and demonstrating how its mathematical components apply to the human cardiovascular system.
And the quantitative result was fantastic, right? The authors noted that utilizing the AI reduced their manual review time by over 50%.
Yes, the speed was there, but the qualitative experience was a bit chaotic. Here is where the underlying mechanics of the AI become a hurdle. The model exhibited high sensitivity, meaning it was aggressively eager to make concepts fit.
Aggressively eager, like that.
It would find linguistic or thematic connections where the actual educational relevance was incredibly weak or just completely non-existent.
Because the AI operates on probabilistic token prediction. If it sees blood pressure in standard A and blood pressure mentioned offhandedly in standard B, it draws a massive bright line between.
Regardless of whether standard B is actually teaching the concept or just mentioning a patient's vitals in passing.
It is like hiring a wildly overenthusiastic caffeinated intern.
Oh, absolutely.
You ask them to find connections in the files. They come back to your office, pointing at a cork board, completely covered in red string, connecting every single document to every other document.
Yes, the red string everywhere.
Box. I connected the cardiovascular fluid flow equation to the history of the stethoscope, and I linked that to the cafeteria sodium policy. It is mathematically connected, but practically useless.
It requires a human manager to walk inside and say, take down 80% of the string. Doesn't make any sense.
That dynamic is exactly what the research teaches. The human educators have to step in, evaluate the scrolling outputs, and implement follow-up prompts to aggressively constrain the model.
They had to force the AI to tighten its specificity and remove the extraneous, loosely correlated data.
The AI's desperation to be comprehensively helpful manifests as a flood of false positives. It is the ultimate proof that outsourcing the final judgment to the machine is impossible.
Right. Human oversight is the only mechanism that filters mathematical correlation into educational relevance.
So if we follow the blueprint, we have found the gaps, we have established the progressive goals, we have navigated the red string to lock down our objectives. Now we reach the practical core of the entire endeavor, the how.
Current step forward.
Exactly. Educational methods. We have to determine the actual pedagogical strategies to teach these specific objectives. And in this phase, the AI evolves from an administrative assistant into a high-level instructional design consultant.
The challenge of instructional design is ensuring that the teaching method aligns with the evidence. The authors wanted to align their program standards with a highly specific educational concept, structured verbal feedback.
But they recognized a danger here. If you ask an LLM a broad question of feedback, it will generate a generic blog post style summary. It will give you conversational platitudes.
Right. They needed rigorous, standard-aligned methodology, not a LinkedIn post.
So to achieve this, they utilized a specific prompting strategy, restricting the LLM to a highly defined knowledge base. They uploaded both the academic research concepts regarding structured feedback and the specific rigid program requirements of their institution directly into the prompt.
And by establishing that dual context window, they forced the AI to cross-reference the pedagogical theory against the institutional mandate.
What did it output?
The model synthesized the data and generated actionable best practices, such as implementing regular structured verbal feedback sessions that provide timely guidance focused explicitly on documented strengths and areas for improvement. But the crucial element was the justification.
It actually cited its work.
It did. The AI specifically noted that learners prefer structured verbal feedback because the uploaded research proves it associates with objective measures of improvement. Furthermore, it explicitly cited the exact institutional standard requiring timely formative evaluation. It didn't just tell faculty what to do, it provided the evidence-based and compliance-based arguments for why they had to do it.
The amount of labor saved there is immense. Instead of an educator spending 3 days digging through PubMed to find literature to justify teaching method to a curriculum committee, the AI provides a comprehensive, synthesized argument with the structural citations already built in.
Though, keeping our previous warnings in mind, a human still has to click the links and ensure the AI didn't hallucinate the research.
Always verify. The synthesis of complex pedagogical options is where the AI truly excels, particularly when formatting that data for human decision making. The authors demonstrate this by using the AI to generate comparative analysis tables.
Yes, and I think this specific application might be the most transferable insight for anyone listening, regardless of your industry.
Oh, absolutely. The authors were tackling a competency known as systems-based practice.
Systems-based practice is an inherently difficult concept to teach. It requires a medical learner to understand how a single patient interaction is embedded within a massive, complex healthcare system.
They consider insurance structures, resource allocation, community care networks, socioeconomic factors. There's a lot.
The faculty needed to determine the best way to teach this, and they wanted to compare 3 distinct methodologies: self-directed learning, case-based learning, and simulation-based learning.
And instead of asking the AI for a summary, which would yield pages of dense paragraphs, they prompted it to generate a detailed comparison table. They dictated the exact columns of that table.
They asked the AI to compare the three methods across specific factors: the level of learner engagement, the scalability of the method, the cognitive load placed on the student, the real-time adaptability of the lesson, the faculty preparation time required, the complexity of assessing the student, and the degree of learner autonomy.
Structuring the output as a matrix forces the AI to distill its semantic understanding into immediate actionable data.
The resulting table was a masterclass of clarity. For self-directed e-learning, the table highlighted that engagement was moderate, and the focus was largely on foundational knowledge. Scalability was extremely high, and faculty prep time was low.
Highly efficient, somewhat passive.
Right. Contrast that with case-based learning, which the AI noted offered high engagement, promoted critical thinking, but required moderate faculty prep.
What about simulation?
For simulation-based training, the table showed very high engagement because it directly replicates real-world clinical scenarios. However, the matrix immediately illuminated the drawbacks. Simulation possesses massive faculty resource needs, low scalability, and highly complex assessment requirements.
Increase an instant dashboard for decision-making. You're a program director with only 2 available faculty members and a cohort of 150 students. You look at that scalability column and immediately realize that simulation-based training is mathematically impossible for this fit.
You pivot to case-based learning without having to read a 20-page white paper on instructional.
It bridges the gap between pedagogical theory and logistical reality. And it also pushes educators out of their comfort zones for designing individual lessons, which the authors explored by mapping active learning strategies to specific objectives.
Yeah, they focused on a highly complex, notoriously difficult physiological topic, teaching first-year medical students about systolic and diastolic heart failure using pressure volume loops.
Okay, pressure volume loops.
They're the bane of many first-year medical students. They're intricate, graphical representations that plot pressure inside the left ventricle of the heart against the volume of blood during a single cardiac cycle.
Teaching how those graphs shift dynamically during different types of heart failure via a traditional passive slide deck lecture almost universally results in poor student retention.
The faculty knew they needed an active learning method.
So they prompted the AI. They fed the objective, specified that the environment was a small group setting, and asked for active learning strategies. And the AI didn't just offer 1 or 2 ideas. It generated 9 comprehensive, distinct instructional strategies.
The sheer volume of ideation is the value here. One of the strategies the AI detailed was concept mapping.
What did that do?
It suggested moving students away from their screens and having them work collaboratively on a large physical whiteboard. The prompts instructed the AI to provide the exact mechanics of the exercise. The AI suggested having the students visually draw and link key physiological determinants, stroke volume, preload, afterload, and myocardial contractility.
It told the faculty to make the students physically draw the connections, to visually map how an increase in afterload alters the shape of the pressure volume loop during systolic failure.
The AI even generated the pedagogical goal of the exercise, organizing complex ideas to explicitly illustrate the interconnectivity of factors of heart failure.
If you consider the standard operational run most professionals fall into, this is a revelation. When humans are exhausted, faculty members are stretched thin between clinical duties and teaching. They default to the path of least resistance.
They open PowerPoint, they create 20 slides with bullet points, they talk at the students for an hour.
Right. And if you listening have ever had to present a quarterly report or a project update to your team, you know this exact pain. You are out of creative energy, so you just throw numbers on a slide and read them out loud.
But what the authors are demonstrating is that you can use an LLM as a creative sparring partner.
You can ask it to instantly generate 9 active, engaging, novel ways to present complex data, breaking you on your cognitive.
The AI functions as a tireless ideation engine, but the authors temper this excitement with the necessary warning. An LLM generating 9 ideas does not mean it generated 9 feasible ideas.
Right.
The AI might suggest an active learning exercise that requires equipment the institution doesn't own, or a time frame that doesn't fit the block schedule. It generates the possibilities, but the human educator must apply the constraints of reality.
Which brings us directly into the collision with reality. We have built the map. We have designed a beautiful, engaging, progressive curriculum. But a curriculum on paper is useless and cannot be executed.
Now we arrive at section 4, making it real.
Step 5, implementation. Moving from theoretical pedagogy to practical execution requires meticulous, exhaustive project management. Here, the AI reveals its utility as a hyper-organized administrative powerhouse.
The first barrier to implementation is often the educators themselves. The authors address this in their approach to mapping faculty development.
It is a profound, often overlooked insight. You can write the most brilliant modern curriculum in the world, but if your faculty does not possess the skills to teach it, the curriculum will fail on contact with the students.
You cannot simply write the phrase interprofessional collaboration into a syllabus and expect doctors, nurses, and hospital administrators to instantly seamlessly know how to co-teach a room full of students.
Exactly.
Educational literature routinely points out that systematic needs assessment are frequently missing from faculty development programs. Administrators tell faculty what to teach, rarely assess if they know how to teach it.
The authors utilize the AI to review their newly generated curriculum objectives to spot these exact human bottlenecks.
The AI analyzed the objectives and identified that the heavy reliance on systems-based practice and interprofessional collaboration meant the faculty themselves had a knowledge gap.
What was the solution?
The model suggested that before the curriculum could launch, the institution would need to run specific targeted workshops for the faculty on team-based communication dynamics and strategies for navigating complex, localized healthcare systems.
The AI anticipated the failure point. It proactively highlighted that the prerequisite to student learning is teacher training.
That capacity to extrapolate secondary logistical requirements is incredibly powerful, and the authors pushed that capability to its absolute limit when they tasked the AI with creating a comprehensive implementation checklist.
Oh, this part is amazing. They needed to design a 50-minute instructional session for medical students regarding best prompting practices and prompt engineering for healthcare applications.
Right.
They instructed the AI to adopt the persona of a faculty expert and generate an exhaustive implementation checklist aligned with Kern's 5th step.
The output generated from that single prompt was staggering in its scope. The AI produced a massive 5-page, highly structured implementation guide.
5 pages for a 50-minute class.
I know. It bypassed simple administrative reminders like book a room or print the syllabus. It categorized the entire endeavor across multiple logistical domains. It provided temporal organization, breaking tasks down into pre-session milestones, during session execution, and post-session follow-up.
It detailed the resource requirements, built risk mitigation strategies, outlined the assessment plans, and established quality improvement processes for future iterations.
To understand the granularity, we have to look at the pre-session planning the AI generated 4 to 6 weeks required in class. It dictated securing a classroom, which is standard, but then instructed the faculty to verify that the room had adequate internet connectivity. It explicitly told them to test the bandwidth requirements to ensure 40 students accessing an LLM simultaneously wouldn't crash the network, and confirm that all students possess the correct institutional software license.
And my absolute favorite part, it explicitly told the faculty to prepare offline, localized backups of the AI demonstrations.
Yes.
The model actively anticipated that the hospital Wi-Fi would likely crash during a live technology demonstration, and it built a contingency plan to protect us. That level of logistical anticipation is wild.
It really is. The authors estimated that generating a single comprehensive document saved them 32 hours of faculty and administrative time.
32 hours is an entire work week reclaimed for a single individual. However, the authors are extremely transparent about the blind spots inherent in this process.
Right, because a 5-page checklist generated by an AI is comprehensively generic. It included several administrative elements that lacked any relevance to their specific program's operation.
And more critically, it completely missed the localized friction. The AI doesn't know that the projector in lecture hall B has had a color distortion issue since 2022.
It doesn't know that the IT department requires a minimum 3-week lead time to approve new software licenses.
It is entirely blind to the idiosyncratic nuances of institutional culture and infrastructure. The AI operates in a theoretical space where administrative processes work perfectly. The human operates in the messy reality of broken projectors and bureaucratic delays.
The core takeaway here is that AI is the ultimate generator of the 95% rough draft. It completely eliminates the terror of the plan.
It saves you 32 hours of racking your brain trying to remember every single logistical detail of a curriculum rollout. It offloads the mental burden of structural organization, preserving your cognitive energy so you can focus entirely on that final crucial 5%, the human localized nuance.
You let the machine build the scaffolding, and you apply the architectural finishing touches.
Which brings us to the ultimate reckoning of any educational endeavor. Section 5, did it work? This corresponds to Kern's Step 6 evaluation.
We have assessed the needs, defined the objectives, chosen the instructional methods, and managed the implementation. But all of that is performative. We cannot empirically prove that the learner actually absorbed the required knowledge.
Evaluating medical knowledge is incredibly difficult, and it usually takes the form of the most universally despised task in all of academia: writing multiple choice questions or MCQs.
Oh, they're awful to write.
Anyone who's ever tried to write a good test question knows that it is agonizingly slow.
Okay.
You can't make it too easy. You can't make the wording confusing. And crucially, you have to test the student's ability to apply knowledge in a real scenario, not just test their ability to memorize flashcards.
Constructing a valid medical board-style question is both an art and a highly rigorous science. You have to craft STEM, the clinical scenario, you have to write the lead-in question.
Right.
Then you have to generate the correct answer alongside plausible distractors, incorrect answers that are just accurate enough to catch a student who only possesses a superficial understanding of the topic. The authors utilized the AI to tackle this immense burden, focusing on preclinical methods.
They wanted to assess the student's knowledge of hemodynamic changes specifically. The pressures and flows of blood observed during the 4 different classes of physiological shock, as obtained by a right heart catheterization procedure.
But they didn't just ask for a question, they explicitly prompted the AI to align the generated question with taxonomy.
For context, Bloom's taxonomy is a foundational educational framework that classifies learning objectives into hierarchical levels of cognitive complexity.
At the very bottom is basic recall, simple memorization of facts. As you move up the pyramid, you reach understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and finally, creating.
The authors did not want a bottom of the pyramid question. They didn't want the AI to ask, what is the definition of cardiogenic shock? They wanted a question that forced the student to live at the higher tiers of Bloom's taxonomy, to analyze data and apply theoretical knowledge to a specific patient.
And the LLM delivered a highly sophisticated clinical vignette. It generated a scenario describing a 56-year-old male patient with a history of hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and a recent myocardial infarction or heart attack. The STEM detail that presents the emergency department exhibiting severe chest pain, dyspnea, and hypertension. The AI then provided a highly specific set of right heart catheterization measurements, including right atrial pressure, pulmonary artery pressure, and cardiac health.
It built an entire mathematically consistent patient profile. And the leading question asks, which of the following is the most likely diagnosis based on hemodynamic?
The correct answer generated by the model was cardiogenic shock due to acute myocardial infarction. But the true value of the AI's output wasn't just the question and the correct answer.
Distractors, right?
Yes. The model generated the plausible distractors, hypovolemic shock, distributive shock, etc., and it provided detailed paragraph-length explanations for why the correct answer was right, and exactly why every single incorrect option was physiologically wrong based on the provided catheterization.
It didn't just write a test question. It generated a complete self-contained study and assessment package. The administrative impact of this is profound.
The authors reported that utilizing the LLM reduced the time required to write, format, and justify a single complex MCQ by 80%. Yes. When an educator is tasked with building a 100-question summative exam, an 80% reduction in generation time is nothing short of revolutionary.
The acceleration is uncommon. Here's the response. The stakes regarding evaluation are absolute. You are generating assessment materials concerning life-threatening medical conditions. If an AI hallucinates, if it accidentally swaps a normal pulmonary wedge pressure reading for an abnormal one in the vignette, and the faculty fails to catch it, you are actively teaching a medical student the exact wrong diagnostic criteria for heart failure.
It is a terrifying thought. The AI is highly confident, even when it is completely wrong.
Which is why the authors reiterate that human expert oversight is strictly, unequivocally required. The AI is drafting the clinical parameters. The intending physician must verify that the math aligns with physiological reality. The human is the final arbiter of truth.
And evaluation doesn't stop at the individual student level. To ensure the map is actually working, you have to evaluate the entire curriculum. You have to align your programmatic evaluations.
The authors demonstrated this by trying to assess that notoriously difficult competency we discussed earlier, systems-based practice. Specifically, they wanted to evaluate if learners could successfully identify patient safety issues and implement quality improvement opportunities in the hospital system.
You cannot easily test systems-based practice with a multiple choice question. It requires a behavioral and observational assessment. Faculty use the AI not as a content generator, but as a brainstorming collaborator for structural design.
They prompted the AI to design a comprehensive framework for assessing this complex competency.
The AI responded by suggesting a multi-pronged systemic evaluation approach. It didn't rely on a single metric. It suggested 4 distinct methods of evaluation.
What was the first?
First, direct observation in real clinical settings, utilizing a checklist to see how learners actually respond to real medical assessments. Second, written assessments using complex case studies to evaluate their medical understanding of hospital protocols. Third, practical hands-on simulation scenarios to measure physical and communicative responses to engineered system failure. Finally, integration assessments requiring learners to present a quality improvement project to evaluate their ability to synthesize and apply knowledge across different operational content.
Furthermore, the model provided structural guidelines for how often these assessments should occur, what the baseline performance standard should be, how to structure remediation processes for students who fail, and what documentation the accreditation boards would require to prove the competency was met.
This single prompt saved the curriculum committee an estimated 4 hours of high-level brainstorming. It provided a comprehensive, defensible framework that they could immediately begin to tailor to their specific departmental capabilities.
So if we look back at the journey, we have successfully walked through the entire architectural blueprint, the initial needs assessment, all the way through to multi-level evaluation.
We have seen how prompt engineering using techniques like persona patterns, restricting context windows, and explicitly defining constraints can save weeks of administrative time.
We've seen AI generate novel active learning methods, build exhaustive implementation checklists, and draft complex evaluations. The utility is tons.
The efficiency gains are paradigm shifting. The AI successfully manages the overwhelming complexity of the information. But
yes, we arrive at section 6, the final and arguably most vital part of this deep dive, the human element.
Because despite all of this technological triumph, the authors of the study draw a very hard, unyielding philosophical line at the conclusion of their paper.
They pivot away from prompt engineering and focus entirely on responsibility, accountability, and moral agency.
It is the anchor of the entire study. The authors construct a core argument that must cover all AI integration. Responsibility and accountability are distinctly, exclusively human traits.
Right.
A large language model can map a curriculum with breathtaking speed. It can semantically cross-reference thousands of objectives. It can generate clinical vignettes and anticipate Wi-Fi failures. But it does not possess moral agency.
It cannot make a conscious decision based on intrinsic understanding of medical or emotional processes.
In medical education, this isn't a philosophical church. The stakes are literal life and death.
When a medical curriculum fails, when an accreditation standard is ignored, when a gap in the map is left unaddressed, or when a physiological concept is taught incorrectly because of AI hallucination, consequences do not stay inside the learning management system. They ripple out into the physical world. A real patient suffers the consequence of that administrative failure.
And it is the human educator who must bear the weight of that reality. Educators have to live with the legal, the professional, and the deep personal impacts of their curriculum choices.
When a student they train successfully navigates a trauma and saves a life, the educator experiences profound pride. And conversely, when the educational system fails a learner, and that learner subsequently fails the patient, the educator experiences profound remorse.
An algorithm cannot feel remorse. A neural network cannot feel pride. The machine does not and cannot contend with the downstream human consequences of its mathematical outputs.
But let me push back on this because I think this is where the culture shock actually originates. If we are integrating a system where the AI is doing 80% of the actual work, if the machine is writing the objectives, picking the teaching methods, generating the comparison matrices, and drafting the test questions, aren't we, by definition, slowly outsourcing our moral agency?
That's a fair concern.
Right. If an error slips through that AI's high sensitivity net, if a hallucinated test question gets approved because a fatigued professor trusted the machine too much, who's really to blame? Doesn't the tool's efficiency inherently dilute the human's accountability?
That is the exact trap the authors are warning against, and their answer is unequivocal. The blame falls entirely on the human. The human-AI collaboration in education is fundamentally designed to enhance human cognitive capabilities, not to replace them. Outsourcing the tedious administrative mapping of a curriculum is an acceptable use of the technology. Outsourcing the final ethical judgment is a dereliction of professional duty.
Moving the faculty from AI resistance to AI acceptance does not mean teaching them to blindly trust the machine. It means requiring them to step up and assume the role of the ultimate ethical gatekeeper.
It is the analogy of being handed a high-powered tool after spending your entire career using a handsaw.
The power tool is exponentially faster, and it is vastly more efficient. But if you let your attention drift for even a second, that power tool will cause catastrophic damage much faster than the handsaw ever could.
Exactly. The sheer power of the technology demands that be infinitely more responsible and more vigilant, not less.
The human educator's oversight now extends far beyond simply monitoring curricular alignment on a spreadsheet. It involves a deeply emotional and ethical commitment to the final outcome of the educational process.
The AI is a phenomenal technological collaborator. It facilitates the heavy lifting of the work. But the responsibility for what is taught, how it is taught, and the caliber of the position produced remains uniquely, heavily human.
Let's bring all of this together. We started with the incredibly painful, detail-oriented task of organizing human knowledge. We walked through Kern's 6-step model and witnessed how sophisticated AI prompt engineering can conquer administrative overload.
We saw how restricting an AI's creativity allows it to act as a flawless auditor, and how utilizing persona patterns can translate rigid bureaucracy into semantic meaning.
We observed the immense practical utility of AI in instructional design, alongside its very real inherent limitations, its tendency to find non-existent red string connections, its complete blindness to localized institutional friction, and its total lack of moral agency.
Whether you are managing the architecture of a medical curriculum, designing a corporate training program, or simply trying to structure your own pursuit of complex knowledge. Central lesson at the University of Washington.
Let the artificial intelligence do the heavy lifting of organization, cross-referencing, and drafting. Use the machine to cure the terror of the blank page, but you must remain the conscious architect of the final product.
You must bring your human expertise, your empathy, and your unyielding ethical judgment to the final edit. The machine provides the structure, but the human provides the meaning.
Which leaves me with one final provocative thought for you to consider as we wrap up. If we extrapolate the trajectory of this technology out over the next decade, if AI eventually reaches a point where it perfectly and instantly automates the entire logistical, administrative, and mapping burden of education,
If the what to teach and the how to teach are generated flawlessly in seconds,
exactly, then the fundamental role of the teacher is going to be forced to radical mutation.
how do you see that evolving?
Future educators will no longer be valued for their ability to organize information, or their skill at drafting supply, or their capacity to grade multiple choice questions. Those tasks will be effectively free and ubiquitous. Instead, educators will be valued purely and exclusively for their unique humanity. They will be prized for their empathy, their ethical guidance, and their unique ability to look a struggling student in the eye and help them navigate the crushing emotional weight of holding a human life in their hands.
Wow. When the administrative mapping of knowledge becomes free and instantaneous, the authentic human connection becomes the ultimate, irreplaceable premium product of education.
The introduction of the ultimate artificial mind forces the educator to become more profoundly human.
Exactly. We started this deep dive talking about a map drawn on water, an overwhelming, constantly shifting landscape of information.
Artificial intelligence finally gives us the power to freeze that water, chart the territory instantly and perfectly. But a map, no matter how flawless, is still just a piece of paper. It still requires a human compass to decide which direction we actually ought to go.
And in this new landscape, that compass is.
Thanks for taking the deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time.